Hey there, Jackson. Hope you're doing well. All right. In case you weren't able to get your scan of your face done, I'm going to include um, a kind of a stock uh, head scan, basically, that I'm going to work with right now. So you can do the same if you want, if your scan's not working out. So we're just going to go through the workflow of how to do this. And it might take a couple of times because there's a lot of steps and they kind of have to be done in order. So it's not a bad idea to just do this a couple times. I certainly had to do it a couple times. So here's how it goes. We're going to import, and this is the head I'm going to send to you as well to use if you want. It's just called base head, and I downloaded it from the internet. And we'll click open and maximize this window. Okay, so to begin, we are going to just move this thing around and get it positioned correctly before we do anything to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, let's see what I want to do. Edit. Yeah, transform. I'm going to move it, turn it upright. And then once I start turning, if you bring your, see how I'm bringing my cursor way out? The increments kind of slow down. So if you're in really close, it moves in big increments. But if you bring your cursor out, it moves in smaller, finer increments. And we're gonna go 90. But you can also see right here this rotation. This is where I was at. I'm gonna just type in 90 there. But a lot of times you got to move it first before you can see which axis that it's moving in, because the axes in this program are different. Usually Z, if you're a machinist like you, Z is straight up and down. Z is not up and down on this one. It always confuses me. So then we're going to move, I'm going to turn it around this way. Ultimately, we want his eyes in front. So you can see up here, we're kind of moving towards that direction. So we want his eyes facing the front. So let's go over here. 90. And then we're going to just move him up. So he's above that grid mostly. Okay. So we're good. We can click accept. And now when we click front, it's going to face forward. One of the other things that's kind of strange is when you zoom in, we're going to eventually zoom right through the mesh. It's going to slow down and then it's going to go like that, which is kind of annoying because a lot of times we want to get in closer than that. So what you do is you're going to click the select tool, and we're just going to pick a point, doesn't matter, somewhere. And then you'll say view and say recenter view. And then it'll allow you to get in really close without going through the inside, which is going to be really important later on. So that was something that threw me originally. So, all right. So now we've got it oriented correctly. But a lot of times when things come in, it's difficult to tell how big they are. So we're going to go to analysis, units and dimensions. And it gives us a bounding box. It's going to show us roughly how big this is. So right now this is 5 millimeters. You can see the units here. 5 millimeters by 4 millimeters, which means it's very, very small. We're going to go ahead and leave it. I'm going to leave it in millimeters. You can change this if you want. You can change the units here, and then it'll allow you to convert it or keep it the same. So if I kept it the same, it would just change the units, and then this would become 5 inches wide, and this would be 4.22 inches deep. or you can convert it, and then the millimeters get converted into inches. So then it would be really small. We're not going to do that right now. We're just going to leave it. Whoops, convert, Control Z. Doesn't matter. We converted back to millimeters, and now you can see it's really tiny, 0.19 millimeters. What we care about is this right here. It says selected, measured, which is interesting. So if we go to the front, and right here it says left drag. So when we're in units and dimensions, I know that most males have like a pupil to pupil dimension of around 70, somewhere in there, like 65 to 75. I'm just going to pick 70. So if I click here, click roughly the pupil on the right, we can then say target length. We can make that 70. So this ends up being really helpful in a lot of different situations. So let's say you scanned something on your truck and you weren't sure, like if you're working with a lot of organic things, it's difficult to get a good measurement and get a good scale. But let's say you had a piece of square tubing that you knew that it was 1.5 by 1.5. You could then go in and click click and drag a line, and then set that length to the tubing that you knew the length of, and then everything would scale off of that. Super handy. So now if we click units and dimensions, you'll see that it's much bigger. So we've got appropriate amount of millimeters, basically. And let's go ahead and I'm just going to double check that measurement here. So if we click this again, if we right or left click and drag, this should be roughly around 70. And when we look over here, yeah, 70.762. So we're good. Okay. So then we've got an appropriately sized head. And on yours, like if you're working with your scan data, you can go to a mirror and measure your own distance between your pupils. And that's going to be a really easy way to do it. Or, other parts, I guess, like measuring your head is really difficult. We've tried to do that with students before. Like calipers don't fit over unless you have a giant set of calipers. That's kind of tricky, but I found that pupil to pupil is pretty doable because you can also do it yourself in the mirror with a ruler or whatever. Okay, then we're going to click W, the W key, and that's going to go to the wireframe view. So now we can see all of our triangles, and again, our zoom is kind of messed up again. Mine is anyway. So I'm going to redo my zoom real quick. Select view, recenter view. Okay. And now we can zoom in really close. We're going to need to start zooming in kind of close at this point. Okay. So the triangles are pretty big. And we don't really care about any of this up here. We're basically going to concern ourselves with where our mask is going. And so we're going to remesh this and make it smaller triangles so that we can get more definition in our mask and get smoother boundaries, basically, with our mask. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to go to the select tool, and then because we want our mask to be uniform on both sides, like symmetrical on both sides, we're going to click this symmetry button. And this gets really handy. So right now it has a plane of symmetry that follows that white line. So the plane of symmetry is going in the wrong direction. We want plane of symmetry going this way, down their face. So if we click this, configure symmetry plane, we can then turn plane of symmetry. And this one, we just have to kind of drag to 90 roughly. And it doesn't have to be perfect. And now if we look down the face, as long as it's pretty much going down the center of his nose, you're pretty good. You can, if it's not going down the center, I guess we can, I think it's good. Center pretty well. If yours wasn't, you can click and drag the blue arrow and go side to side, and that'll get you symmetric. And so now you're going to see why I did that. Okay. So now when we select some mesh, I'm going to start at the bridge of the nose. It's going to go down symmetrically on both sides. That's super helpful because then you end up with evenly selected mesh. And what I want you to do is just select a pretty big boundary because we're not making the mask right now. We're just remeshing this area. So we just want a kind of a bigger area than we think we might need for the mask. Select out here. I'm not going super big because then the file gets really large. Right, so then we'll go to remesh. And then we can increase the density. So as I drag this density slider, you can see that it's getting smaller. And that's pretty good, like that's 25%. You can see it now in comparison. That's good. That's fine. Say accept. And now we've got nice, got a lot more triangles here. So you can see that the boundary is a little bit rough here. Say clear selection. And now what we're going to do is we're going to select the area where our mask is going to be. So again, we've got our boundary tool on it. I'm going to go with a slightly smaller brush. I'm going to start up here. And basically you want it to go around the outside of the mouth so that the edge of the mask isn't pushing on the edge of your mouth. That'd be pretty uncomfortable. And also you don't want it pushing on the edge of your nose. Then you we're going to select all of this in the middle. Okay. So then, come out a little bit wider. Okay. And then we're going to go to let's see, modify smooth boundary. And when you get really fluent with this, you'll start to remember the shortcut keys, and all the shortcut keys are here. So B is for smooth boundary. But just go through the menus. When you do that, it's going to give you the boundary of your mask right here. And I'm going to go ahead and smooth that out a little bit. So I'm going to click the smoothness tool. And you can kind of mess with these other sliders too. See how it looks. I'm liking the way that looks. So I'm going to say accept. And then you end up with a nice smooth boundary. And view, recenter. You end up with a nice smooth boundary. And that wouldn't be as smooth if you're working with the big triangles. That's why we remesh that. So we end up with a nice smooth boundary. Okay. So then what we're going to do is we're going to offset this face here. We're going to just basically triple click inside there. And we're going to say edit, offset. We're going to say not connected here. We don't want it connected. And we're going to offset it 2 millimeters. Accept. And then when we zoom in, you're going to see we have an offset, slight offset surface. And that is what we want. Okay. So then with that selected, we're going to then separate that. So I'm going to say separate. And what that does is it now makes, now we've got 2 parts. We've got the head and we've got the mask. We're going to call this the mask. And if you just double click in here, mask. And then we could turn off the head if we wanted to, and it's work. Okay. So now when we're going to start modifying this and editing it. If we didn't separate it and we start editing it, it would edit the head underneath it, which we don't want. We want to be able to kind of compare these two. So we're going to work for a little bit just in this setting. So we're going to start kind of sculpting our mask basically. And so we want it to be, we want to preserve this outside area here where it meets your face, but we want to kind of start to sculpt the internal area to look more like an N95 mask or something. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to start deleting and filling some features. So I'm going to start, and you can leave the symmetry on. Symmetry is still a good thing to be using. We're going to start selecting some of the areas that have really kind of jagged geometry. So like really sharp corners and stuff. Then we'll say edit, erase fill, with kind of a smoother area. I'm going to do that again. Select this stuff in here. So kind of see it's starting to smooth out those areas. I might even go down here a little bit. And this is going to make this kind of sculpting process a little easier. We're also going to do the mouth. Okay, so then we end up with something that looks quite a bit smoother. So clear selection. All right. And then what we're going to do is we're going to sculpt this. So we're going to go to the inflate tool right here. And this is where you can, it's a little bit more artistic. So this is where you're going to need to kind of experiment and do some things on your own, try stuff, and then this actually might be a good place to save. So if you did a bunch of stuff that you really didn't like, you can then close the program and then save, and then reopen. So we'll save as, say, version 5 now, and then V5. Okay, go back to sculpt. So brushes, we're going to go to inflate here. So basically, we're going to start inflating this thing, so it starts to I'm going to turn the wireframe off because it's easier to see when it's like this. So strength is here. The size of my brush there. So the longer you hold it in an area, the more it's going to inflate. And so this is where you're going to want to, if something isn't looking right, you can do, Control Z and go backwards. So I don't like that. So Control Z, kind of undo that a bit. Go a bit stronger. I'll go bigger brush so it's more even. Yeah, I might have wanted to do it more evenly from the beginning with a bigger brush. Okay, so now it's kind of bringing it away from the face, inflating it kind of away. So this is where you don't want to mess with the edges because you want it to be close to your face, but like on the, on the nose and around the edge, you might not want that. So it looks kind of lumpy right now. But this is where you'd want to kind of get the profile somewhat flat. So it's away from your face. That looks really crazy. Okay. You could also do, if you didn't like some areas, you could go to flatten. And let's flatten some areas. And so I'm just using kind of a big brush. And so again, it's this is the spot where you might undo a bunch of stuff and redo. And then once you get it to where it looks pretty good, like this. So if you toggle this off, you somehow do that, just make sure it's highlighted, and then you can work on it. Let's go ahead and select the whole thing, and then go to deform smooth. You can see we got a weird spot right there, and you can mess with smooth scaling. Oh, there we go. Just that. So then you end up with a much smoother mask, which is crazy. It's cool. It looked really bad there for a little while. Okay, so try and get to this point, basically, a somewhat smooth mask that's, kind of inflated, except for these areas that are going to be kind of close to the face. And yeah, we'll go from there. So that'll be your work for today. I think that'll take you some time to mess around with the tools and stop the video and start the video and do all that stuff. And feel free to work with this model first if your mesh is not working. So, all right, let me know how this goes.